This is Edward D. McKinney, and today is June 22, 2011, and I am speaking for TwoProphets.org. The subject is Masonic prophecy. Let me tell you a little bit about my background as far as Masonic prophecy. I am not a Freemason, but I am a Bible prophecy researcher, and I found that I cannot really understand Bible prophecy unless I also understand Masonic prophecy. As a matter of fact, our forefathers, when they were designing symbols for the government of the United States, they used Masonic prophecy. Even forefathers who were Christians, but they weren't Freemasons, they borrowed heavily off of Masonic prophetic understanding in the making of our national symbols and our national monuments. And you will see that the Washington Monument is prophetic. There is Masonic prophecy embedded into it. It was about 1989 that I became aware that Masonic prophecy and Bible prophecy correlate. And you know, the computer age came about since then, and there came an opportunity to create websites. And in July of 2007, I was able to create a page called Masonic Prophecy. And this is a very popular web page, and it has a lot of visitors. And since I put up that web page, I realized that I coined the term Masonic prophecy. And there have been a lot of spin-offs since then. And there have been a lot of people putting up information on websites on the internet about quote-unquote Masonic prophecy. There have even been documentaries on television about Masonic prophecy. But really, I have not found any of these websites or any of these documentaries on the History Channel, etc., to have substantial understanding of Masonic prophecy. And I have been studying Masonic prophecy a great deal for a long time, since 1988 and 89, and I came to understand Masonic prophecy through their symbols and architecture, because I realized that their architecture was actually timelines. The very first structure that Masons created that has prophecy embedded into it as calendars and timelines was the Great Pyramid. And the Great Pyramid was created possibly before the Great Flood or immediately after the Great Flood. And the location of the Great Pyramid was among the black race because it was an altar to God, and the black race was heir to the spiritual birthright. Ham received the spiritual birthright, and some of his children, the children that were black, migrated to Africa, and God required that his altars be built among the black people, and that was one of the reasons why the Freemasons created the great monument called the Great Pyramid in Africa. Another monument that Freemasons created was Solomon's Temple, and before that they created the Tabernacle of God. And the Tabernacle of God was actually based upon the same calendar timeline architectural drawing that was used to create the Great Pyramid. And this drawing dates back to Enoch. You might say that as far as we know, Enoch was the first Freemason, but I actually think that Freemasonry goes back before that, because Enoch, the one that we're thinking of, who was in the lineage of Abel, and you remember that Abel was replaced, but that lineage And there was another Enoch who was in the lineage of Cain. And this person is related to architecture and building of cities. But anyway, the Enoch that we know is the one that is related with the Great Pyramid and the great architectural drawing that has come down to us. Now, a third monument that Masons built was Washington Monument, and the same blueprint was used for the Washington Monument, and it came from the Tabernacle of God and the Temple of Solomon, and it came from the Great Pyramid, and it also came from Enoch. So Freemasons have to their credit three incredible structures. They are the Great Pyramid, Solomon's Temple, and the Washington Monument. And because Enoch's original architectural drawing was used, all three of these structures have prophetic timelines embedded into them. Now, I'd like to cover things about Masonic prophecy and these subjects: the relationship between the two witnesses and Masonic prophecy, the correlation between terrorism, such as 9/11, and how that relates to Masonic prophecy. Queen Elizabeth relates to Masonic prophecy because she is actually a person who is predestined or predicted. And in greater detail, we will see Masonic prophecy applying to people of our time. And it appears that General Petraeus is part of Masonic prophecy, and also Colin Powell. Other points that are made on my website is that the Washington Monument is second only to the Great Pyramid in its ability to foretell the future because it has prophecy embedded into it. Another subject that relates to Masonic prophecy are the two witnesses as portrayed on the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was created by Freemasons at the time of Moses, and the two images on the Ark of the Covenant predicted or were prophetic of the two witnesses. Another thing is that the Washington Monument relates to the Masonic symbol of a compass and square, and it was built at its exact height in order to relate to the compass and square, which is in the hands of God, meaning that God created Washington, D.C. and the nation of the United States. Other points that I bring public attention on my web page is that America's Christian forefathers, many of whom were Freemasons, prophesied of the trials that America would go through in the end times. And these include the trials that we're presently going through, and they included 9/11, the terrorist attack. Also, our Christian forefathers, many of whom were Masons, knew the exact years of Elijah, God's two witnesses, and Armageddon. And these dates are embedded in our national monuments. But it was the effect of atheists and also the effect of the secrecy among Freemasons that has kept this information from the public. But I was able to unlock this information by studying the architecture and symbols of Freemason. You might say that those symbols spoke to me. Metaphorically, Masonic symbols spoke to me and revealed to me that the symbols and architecture were prophetic. This sounds hard to believe, but the Washington Monument predicted and honored the Diamond Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth, 2012. And Freemasons 200 years ago, when they created the Washington Monument, were aware of the upcoming Diamond Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth in 2012. Also, Enoch and the builders of the Great Pyramids, the people who actually put the stones together, knew the year of the birth of the next king of England. And this is quite fascinating to see how they did it, how they embedded this prophecy into stone thousands of years ago. Freemasons who created the Washington Monument were well aware of the attack on 9/11. The aluminum capstone was a prophecy of the attack by terrorists who were in aluminum airplanes. Freemasons could have put anything they wanted on the top of the Washington Monument. They could have used gold, brass, silver, anything they wanted, but they used aluminum. And aluminum was a very worst possible choice because it is so vulnerable to lightning attacks. The reason that Freemasons put that aluminum cap on was a prophecy. They could have used any other material, but they used aluminum. And there are stories going around that the Freemasons wanted to use something that was exotic for their time. That is not true. Freemasons could have used anything. They wanted to use aluminum because they foreknew that aluminum would be the material that the airplanes were made of during the 9/11 attack. Now, if you were to talk to the average Freemason about these things, these revelations, they wouldn't know what you're talking about because, you see, Freemasons of the past were far closer to God than they are nowadays. So God gave a lot of revelations to our forefathers, but they do not give revelations to this generation. So the average Freemason nowadays is oblivious to his own history as a Freemason. Freemasons knew that the U.S. Capitol would be under attack, and they took steps to protect the White House by building the Washington Monument at a location as a means to thwart an attack by an airplane. Freemasons knew that America would survive Armageddon. Freemasons knew that the two witnesses would be American. Freemasons knew the exact years of end-time Elijah's ministry. Freemasons foresaw two army generals who would save our nation in the year 2013 through 2015. They knew that one of those generals would be black. And according to my research, we're looking at David Petraeus as president and General Colin Powell as vice president. And these men are totally unaware of what their futures are. But because I understand Masonic prophecy, I am telling you things that they themselves do not know. Now, it could be that there are other people other than Petraeus and Colin Powell, but I would tell you that when I looked into the background of these two men, they matched the profile very well. But of course, there's always a possibility that God would choose other men. These two generals will be involved in the saving of the U.S. government, and we are possibly looking at a civil war, or events that are very close to a civil war. Freemasons knew the year of the resurrection. So did Jesus Christ. Now this sounds strange to us because we keep reading, no man knows the hour, etc., etc. However, in the book of Revelation, Jesus said he was at the resurrection. So he knew the date of the resurrection at some point in history, and it could have been that after Jesus was resurrected, sometime after that, God gave him the vision of the book of Revelation, and in the vision to Jesus Christ in the book of Revelation, Jesus said he was at the resurrection, and he observed it all. So he knew the date at some point. And also in Scripture we know that when Jesus learns something, he immediately tells his friends. And I have no doubt whatsoever that the friends of Jesus were America's Christian forefathers. And Jesus revealed the date to American Christian forefathers. American Christian forefathers embedded the information into the Washington Monument and national symbols. But Jesus does not reveal information, the times and epochs of God, to people who are not his friends. And 99.9% of all Christianity is unaware of what the forefathers knew, because they are not as close to God as our forefathers were. In other words, these people are not in the inner circle of God, of Jesus Christ, so Jesus Christ does not tell them anything. Another point to be made is that Antichrist are attacking our national symbols and trying to turn them into evil things. These people are demon-possessed. There are also anti-Masons who are attacking our government. They actually hate Christianity, they hate the U.S. government, and they hate Christians. But they're leveling their attack on Masons. And this is a sneaky way to attack the American public and to attack the church. It's sort of an offhanded way. They know that they can't get away with attacking the church full on, so what they do is attack our symbols. But Masons were extremely Christian people, probably far more Christian than the average churchgoer was in their time. They were very devout, and their attendance at church was nothing. I mean, somebody could say, well, they didn't attend church regularly. Well, that doesn't mean anything, because your relationship with God is not through a church and a church leader. And a lot of our Christian forefathers were so ahead of their time in spiritual development that going to some church corporation was like stepping backwards, like stepping into darkness. And it is a fact that nowadays a lot of people who are extremely close to God are not related to any church organization at all. And a lot of church organizations are corrupt. And a lot of church leaders are only in it for the money. They're hustlers. So you can see why a lot of people would not attend church, and you can see why forefathers would not be in church all the time. And when they went to church, it was more like a public display to let everybody know that they supported Christianity and the church. In other words, Satan is behind the hate-mongering by Antichrist and anti-Masons. And they hate America's forefathers, they hate the U.S. government, they hate representative government, they hate Christianity in government, they hate the church, they hate Christians. But they're sneaky and slimy people. And you're wasting your time trying to talk any sense to these people because they're demon-possessed. Like Jesus said, don't cast pearls before swine. And if you try to talk sense to these people, they're pigs and they're going to step on the pearls and then attack you. One of the symbols that is most revealing to me in my studies is the pyramid, the Great Seal Pyramid, because if you put a ruler next to the pyramid,